Welcome to Avenue M. My name is Joey Taylor.
And I'm Haroon Mogul.
We're two men on a journey of faith and meaning. In each episode, we unpack the moments that shape us, the struggles that build us, and the questions that intrigue us. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey isn't just a blockbuster. It's a cultural event that's reignited an ancient conversation about heroes, morality, and the stories that shape us. In this episode, we ask whether Nolan faithfully retells Homer's epic or quietly transforms it into a profoundly modern argument about power, responsibility, and what holds a civilization together. Along the way, we explore why this film has become a lightning rod for debates about history, faith, politics, and the purpose of great stories in the first place. Whether you're a lifelong fan of Homer or you've only just left the theater, this conversation asks why a story nearly 3,000 years old still feels so urgent today.
Joey, do you think that there is a person out there, a man preferably, who drives a Honda Odyssey, who did not realize until this movie where the name of his minivan came from?
Oh, absolutely that happened. For
What do you
sure.
think is going on in his head?
I think he's now on an epic quest to deliver his kids to soccer practice.
Do you think that he feels like a hero?
Yes, he must. He must.
To our readers who drive Honda Odysseys, you are a hero. I'm sure it's the same with people who grew up watching The Simpsons and suddenly realized that there was a Homer before Homer Simpson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, spoilers ahead. We are going to talk about Judeo-Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. And do you like what I did there? This episode is not going to be as long as the movie itself. Where did you watch the movie?
I watched it in an IMAX theater in Newport.
How was it?
I thought the movie was, epic, overwhelming, awe-inducing. I thought both the visual, like shooting that whole thing in IMAX, was wild, and the sound was a huge part of the experience. Like the way that Christopher Nolan worked in the sound to just immerse you in that whole environment was quite an experience.
I mean, I think I can sit through a 3-hour movie, but I don't think I even realized 3 hours passed. It was the immersion, the immersive, the word you use just, I think right there is exactly it. And we went on a Wednesday night at a theater in Westchester, and it was IMAX as well. Obviously it's not like the IMAX. I think the IMAX available in our area is in Indianapolis.
Yeah, like a real one.
Which is weird. I think that's probably the only instance in which a marker of civilization exists in Indiana that does not exist in Ohio.
Shots fired.
Usually.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be honest, right? That why Indianapolis, nobody quite knows. But we went on a Wednesday night and it was packed. And honestly, that made me happier than the movie was incredible. I definitely want to go back. I need to see it again on the big screen. But seeing a movie theater full of people in ways that would have been totally normal 20 or 30 years ago was so heartening that it's like, yes, monoculture is back, that we are desperate for things to do together. And I think everyone in the movie theater felt that kind of energy. Like, hey, we're all here for this awesome thing that is, obviously it's an echo of Western civilization, but it's a very contemporary moment too. And that was a very special thing to be a part of. Yeah,
absolutely. I went with two other dads, and we saw it at 10 o'clock. So we were there very late, and we thought we were going to be the only people in the theater. And we walk in, and it's packed.
It's packed.
It's packed. It's crazy. I'm like, we're all going to be here till 1:30 in the morning together. This is insane. Yeah, it's because of the import of this story, because of the marketing around it or whatever it is, it did make it feel like much more of an experience.
I think when we left the theater, there was a long moment of silence because you're processing the contrast from what you just saw to ordinary life. And I will be honest, there's probably a part of every man and maybe every person who romanticizes different historical periods. And the idea of a world in which, obviously, the vast majority of people, even at that time, were not Agamemnon or Odysseus or Menelaus. They were the people on the boat who probably got thrown overboard when it was inconvenient. Or convenient, I should say. Inconvenient for them, convenient for the guy in charge with the biggest helmet. Side note, let's talk about Agamemnon's incredible helmet. But I thought that there was an excitement to seeing that history portrayed, even though I know everything that comes with that history. And I think that's something that people really latched onto, is this idea that there were stakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the reasons why people have been so sensitive to what's in the movie and what's not in the movie, how it's portrayed, is not just because they feel a sense of ownership over the text or they have nothing better to do, although sometimes it might be some of those things, but because when someone is making the case that life has or should have stakes, we all want to be a part of defining what is portrayed in the course of portraying those stakes. Do you think that's fair, or am I being overly generous like I was with Tucker Carlson?
No, I think that we're in a moment right now where it feels like a lot of the world is devoid of meaning and devoid of stakes. And so I think that we're all looking for something where we can have skin in the game, or we can care deeply about it. And yeah, an example of a story that everybody is going to see, a flashback to monoculture, feels like a great opportunity to exercise some of those tendencies. So yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense.
So I was going to ask you what it would have been like to watch the movie with Tucker Carlson, but that's not the podcast we're going to have this week. I was going to ask you, were there any elements of the criticism that has been swirling around the movie, or just the conversation around the movie, that you felt after watching resonated that you might not have thought resonated before watching?
So I'm really fascinated in the act of translation and reinterpretation, and the whole, this is ahistorical and what are we doing with these casting choices and that kind of stuff, that didn't really resonate with me much, because for me, it's pretty obvious that Homer, even Homer himself, or theirselves, or however you want to construct the authorship, that author was making some significant decisions that were probably pretty ahistorical themselves. And so I don't see the work of the Odyssey as a historical text. That's not what I'm expecting of it. I think that as it's told and retold, that, meaning can be found and should be found in this act of translation and reinterpretation. And there's always going to be a tension between what does fidelity look like to the original story, the quote unquote original story, and how does it speak to us today in this moment. And so that stuff didn't resonate with me a whole bunch. But I did think that some of the choices that Christopher Nolan made, specifically the way in which he had this very clean arc, and that Odysseus himself was a pretty simple moral character, that was surprising to me in a way that I would have liked just a little bit of more nuance and complexity there. I thought it was beautiful the way, like some of the ways that he used Zendaya's character to kind of represent the victim history. I think that was beautiful. Sure. I thought the way in which the people of the sea were actually a construction of this army breaking the code, I thought that was beautiful as well. I also wanted just a little bit of more complexity with Matt Damon's character. Like, really, it's just that simple. Like, you never really did anything wrong except for this one big sort of moment when you broke the code. Like, it would have been nice to just have a little bit more complexity, because in Homer's version of the story, he was a very, very complex figure doing a lot of stuff that modern audiences would have felt weren't great, were morally distasteful. Yeah, that was the part where I was like, interesting. Okay.
I had two reactions to the movie. One immediately was, I agree with you on how Odysseus is portrayed. And obviously there's only so much you can do in the span of a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, you have to make decisions. Yeah, for sure.
But you're right. He was flattened out. His complexity, I think Homer kind of portrays him as a wily, creative might be a generous word, sort of character.
A coyote figure.
Yeah, Dan Flores, we hope you're listening. But
yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean, the horse, right? The ploy is itself evidence of trickery. One of my immediate reactions in watching him construct the horse, at this point, it's not even a spoiler, because if you don't know, you should just start your whole life over again. But if I thought it would have been a natural connection to make in the course of the movie that he made this decision because he wanted to go home.
Right.
And to explicitly underscore that he's not doing this just as a stratagem to conclude the war, but in order to conclude the war to get the hell home to his wife and his son. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't want to be there. And then he reckons with what he's done, that his shortcut leads to the annihilation of an entire civilization, which weighed on his conscience more than certainly Darth Vader seemed to struggle after obliterating Alderaan. Did you like how I
Sure.
confused moral universes there? Also, fun fact, House Atreides is purportedly descended from Agamemnon's father, Atreus. So Paul Atreides is kind of like Matt Damon's cousin, but in space. So they could have met on The Martian, but timelines are a little confused. So please don't write to us. But I think the larger arc that you mentioned is I walked out thinking that maybe the trick Christopher Nolan was playing was on us and actually on his critics. That many people have pointed out that the moral universe and conceptual categories through which a person like Odysseus would have navigated the universe are fundamentally alien to people now, that we live, whether we are conscious of it or not, in a Judeo-Christian / Abrahamic moral universe, that most of us believe in ideas like agency, personal responsibility, that compassion is a virtue. That's just how we operate in the world. And he took a quote unquote pagan, pre-Christian, pre-monotheistic story, and he smuggled a very profound contemporary point in the guise of something ancient, that the movie itself is the Trojan horse.
Ooh,
And that
look
he's
at you.
he's
I like
pushed
that,
it,
Haroon. Yeah,
he's
I like
pushed
that.
it through the gates of our culture and forced us to reckon with something. And when people were saying, "Oh, where's the universe that Homer would have recognized and sung about and praised?" That's the universe that exists outside of our movie theater. That the movie is actually the respite from, or the reminder of, our own quote unquote Zeus's law. That we were supposed to have certain ideals and morals and foundations, and instead we have the subversion of them. And so I actually have a lot of thoughts on what you were saying, history and translation and fidelity to the past. But to me, that was actually the point of the movie, that I think people expected someone as sophisticated as Christopher Nolan to produce a straight literal, quote unquote, literal translation of the past. Like, why would he do that? Why would he spend $300 million to just do what Elon Musk wants to do with Grok, right? That's something someone as unoriginal as Elon Musk would think is compelling, right? Also, not fun fact, but fact, I don't know why Elon Musk has to make his own version using Grok. Like, he can self-finance a $300 million movie
Easily.
Like, why?
Easily.
It's not like me. Like, I'll go on Claude, like, hey, write me a movie script, because I got that kind of money. But I don't know. What did you think when you walked out of the theater? What did you think Christopher Nolan was trying to say or show?
That really resonates with me, what you're saying. I think it makes a lot of sense that he's trying to make an argument for a particular moral position, right? Which is something like, we need to have a common moral code that we all are operating under. And the minute that's broken, we risk our whole civilization collapsing. And that's what we're seeing now. I'm convinced that's what he was trying to do. I also think like the clean divide in kind of like the historical perspective, like the people who are super literalist, like in their mind, between pre-Christian kind of pagan Greco-Roman culture and Christian culture, he was showing that there was some real significant connections there, even while we wouldn't necessarily recognize the moral universe of Homer's world today. One of the things that really resonated with me was this idea of the law of Zeus, especially as it related to beggars and travelers, foreigners, that anytime somebody were to come into your home, the palace, whatever it was, that you needed to give them food and water and a place to stay, because they literally could be the divine. They could be God. I mean, Christopher Nolan played with that whole idea a bunch throughout the story. That is straight Matthew 25 stuff about somebody needs a drink of water, something to eat. Anytime that you do that, you do it for the person of Christ. You do it for the least of these. I mean, there is clear inspiration there happening. It was maybe a part of Christopher Nolan's own convictions that he's bringing in there. Yeah. That's the reason why he's emphasizing that. But I thought it was helpful just to recognize that there are some universal practices, truths, principles that really do help to construct a society in a generative way.
I remember a few weeks back, I suggested that there was another group stage in the World Cup where Donald Trump fought bodies of water and lost the Strait of Hormuz and reflecting pool. And the day after we watched, I guess it was a Thursday, I was reading some of the criticism, and some of the criticism of the movie is quote unquote woke because of
casting
choices,
cast
as Helen, and Helen's twin sister. The sisters married brothers, right? So Agamemnon and Menelaus, respectively. And I remember having a really negative reaction to that criticism, but not maybe for the reasons that people would expect, right? Not because I am or am not woke, but because I just thought it was really ahistorical. It was ahistorical criticism masquerading as historical criticism. And
Right.
I actually think it's better to meet the critics of the movie not on our terms, but on their own terms. Like, okay, you want to say that this is not fidelity to history. Let's have a history class. And I will have that history class later, inshallah. But what I was really sitting with was Agamemnon, maybe because he just had such a badass look, convinced all these different Greek city-states, and this is the end of the Bronze Age, right? So this is before the purported sea people who, as you rightly point out in Nolan's version, they themselves become. The sailors ravaging for supplies are the sea people. So this is the end of the Bronze Age. It's the end of classical Greek civilization. Many of the figures that we associate with ancient Greece come centuries later. Many, many centuries later, right? This is the distant past for people like Plato and Socrates, right? So you're right. There's that Zeus's law thing. And I kept thinking of that myself, that Agamemnon convinces all these different kings and their armies to go sail to Troy to get Helen back because Paris is taken, or seducted Helen, or was seducted not even a word, I just made up a word. It's okay. It's like I'm Donald Trump. Excursion, incursion, right? But I kept thinking of our present foreign policy, that we get dragged into these wars that have no end.
Yeah.
And like, what are we doing in the Strait of Hormuz, right? Like, we have become the sea people, right? We've got Marco Rubio talking about freedom of navigation while also talking about let's just start wars with people and take over countries. And I don't think that obviously Christopher Nolan wrote the script before this happened, right? I don't even think anyone planned what happened in the last 4 months. It's the literal definition of shoot first and ask basic questions later, if at all.
Yeah.
But I think the mark of a great writer, thinker, playwright, filmmaker, whatever it might be, is their ability to prophesize. They see something in us and in themselves, and then wittingly or not, consciously or not, they extrapolate from that and imagine what might be. And so to me, the movie was prophetic, not in the religious sense, but in the sense of seeing maybe, am I going too far with that, or am I just angry about foreign policy, and or both?
Well, you're certainly angry about foreign policy. But yeah, I think, I don't know if it was such a dramatic prophetic vision to say. I mean, if you know, we've been living in a pretty similar world for the past decade or so, which with some dubious rationales, especially morally. So I think he's working in the same kind of in the same set of contextual clues when he's writing the movie as this moment when it came out. So no, I think for sure there was a political tinge to the whole thing. This is why the people who are critical of the movie are critical of it, because clearly it was written into this political context. Like, obviously, you know, so yeah, I don't think you're pushing it too far.
Fair. Who is your favorite character in the movie? In the movie, not the actual epic poem.
I don't know. The Calypso character really was interesting to me.
How so?
Well, I think maybe some of it was just Charlize Theron and like just her presence on screen and her level of beauty. But I think also the act of giving the lotus flower to help Odysseus heal from his physical wounds, but then Calypso falling in love with Odysseus, that whole phenomenon of like needing to anesthetize ourselves from reality at some points in order to heal, but then when does it become a crutch and keep us from reality? And then the complicating factor of what about affection and relationships, and how does that factor into the whole thing? I don't know. That part of the story has always been fascinating to me.
Was there a character that you think deserved more time in the movie or more attention?
I mean, I just think all the characters deserve more time, more attention, you know, like every single one of those characters was more complicated in the text than it was on the screen. It feels like an unfair criticism because you have 3 hours to depict something that's like so incredibly large. But a character like the Cyclops, okay, which was made into sort of like, I don't know, a puppet, like, you know, that character was much more complicated in the text, right? And had a whole inner life and did have theological and moral convictions and was part, like all this kind of stuff. And to just kind of like simplify that character to I eat people's heads, you know, it was like, I don't know.
I eat people's heads and I drive a Honda Odyssey to take my kids to soccer practice.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, but something similar could be said, I think, for all the characters. Like, it was a very ambitious task that Christopher Nolan chose to embark on. And I think you could have explored in depth a lot of those characters.
That produced that encounter with, I think it's Polyphemus, the Cyclops, if that's his name, or that's a ingredient in the protein bars I eat. But there's a great line where when they're running out, I think it's Eurycles, who is also my Punjabi cousin Himesh Patel, who there's a line and he says something to Matt Damon, and Matt Damon, obviously Odysseus, his response is, "I think we're past that," which I thought was actually one of the best movie moments, because it was very lighthearted and it felt very contemporary, but you could imagine it being universally true, as in it holds in any time period among a group of guys who've made a decision they now regret, but just have to be very honest about the fact that there's no coming back from it. As an aside, and I feel like the human footnote at this point, there's a figure in Muslim end times eschatology who plays a very significant role, who's called al-Masih ad-Dajjal, the false Messiah or the Antichrist. And just shorthand, Dajjal as in false or fraudulent, deceiving. And he's described as one-eyed. There's a very famous tradition within Muslim eschatology that a man who I believe later becomes Muslim, he's from Palestine, is shipwrecked on an island, and there encounters a one-eyed beast who tells him that he is the Antichrist and his time is coming. And when this man, not the Antichrist, this man who was shipwrecked, encounters the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, many, many years later, he tells him the story and he says, "What you have seen is true. Every prophet, I believe, from Noah till myself," meaning Muhammad referring to himself, "has warned his people of the Antichrist. And he is, he's a man with one eye, and he's plays this very terrifying role in Muslim eschatology." But I'm not just sharing that because it's the stuff of late night conversations in college dorms. Like, do you think Odysseus met Dajjal? And then suddenly your worlds have come together and then you feel like you belong in Western civilization, although it's not a point you probably want to raise in class. Nevertheless, the underlying point there is that these stories are overlapping. And so you mentioned Zeus's law. And when we were talking earlier, you mentioned an analogy to, or maybe it's more than that, in the gospel. And I wanted to hear you talk about that a little bit more.
Christopher Nolan said, as he was making this, that he's realized he's been telling this story his whole entire career, right? And I think in a lot of ways, the Iliad and the Odyssey are just the Western civilizational story.
Would it be fair to call Christopher Nolan a one-trick pony? Was the most dad joke I've ever done on the podcast. That was great, because the trick only works once. And was it a pony or was it a horse? But sorry, continue. I had to. I apologize. I couldn't. I think we're past that.
So I think that even like the schema of weaving narratives, the way that he did and the way that Homer did, there's just so much continuity between the way we tell stories even now. So from the rhetorical strategies to even the themes, there's just going to be continuity. There almost has to be. I think this is the way. Talk about monoculture. The way that we make meaning through history within the context of a community is by sharing stories that persist, that continue to resonate. And I think what we do as humans is we tell and retell stories. We find thematic resonance. That's what meaning looks like for us. And so it's not surprising at all to me that there is connections and continuity between these different traditions. I would be shocked if there weren't. What it does for me as a person who tries to follow Christ is that it just gives me a little bit of humility, in terms of my tradition, because there is truth, there is value, there is good that exists outside of my tradition. And it's just really helpful to be reminded of that whatever expectation I have of novelty from the Sermon on the Mount or the Gospels or whatever, I can find echoes of that, resonance of that. I can find rhymes with that throughout history. And that's actually a really good thing. It's not a threat.
So I have two follow-up questions. One is bigger, one is smaller. So I'm going to ask the bigger question because why the heck not?
Yeah.
Do you think that monotheism requires monoculture?
Damn, that is a big question. That is a big question.
I smuggled that in. Just put it in a Honda Odyssey and drove it through the gates.
I can understand why you would say yes, but my construction of monotheism can't require monoculture.
Cannot?
It can't. Yeah. I'm talking about my own construction So I'm not talking about like a cultural monotheism. I'm not talking about civilizational monotheism. I'm saying for me personally, I mean, I've talked about this in past episodes, but it feels like apophaticism, like being able to talk about what God is not, is a much more faithful way than making positive theological declarations, because God is so beyond our understanding. And so what that means to me is that we just are desperate for multiple people's perspective on what the divine is. I think it's just really hard to have a monocultural story about the divine that makes room for a diversity of perspectives and experiences.
So first of all, I have to applaud you for saying apophaticism, working it just casually into the conversation. Honda Odyssey listener has clearly pulled over at this point, but is looking it up on using Claude. Before you give me that script for new not woke Odyssey, what is apophaticism?
I defined it. It's like, speaking about God in negatives instead of being able to talk about God in positives, because when we talk about God in assertions, we're always falling short with our language.
That's so interesting. We're going to do a separate episode on all the theological concepts Harun should know but doesn't know. But I wanted to make a historical point. We've previously talked, you and I, Joey, about what is the right approach to people we might not agree with. And one of the reasons we had the Tucker Carlson episode last week was because we were trying to work that out. That what happens when you converge with someone on one issue, but you strongly diverge on another issue? How does one navigate that? And you came up with some really thoughtful questions to help people of faith and conscience. You did. I mean, they're really great. They're on our Instagram right now. Like and subscribe. But we also have talked about this more broadly. How should liberals talk about conservatives? How should conservatives talk about liberals?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons to me that's been really meaningful is when I hear people say, oh, this is an ahistorical rendition of the Odyssey, and a common response is, oh, well, great art belongs to all of us and we're always wrestling with it and struggling with it. And sometimes it's a more just kind of curt, dismissive, this is a movie, calm down.
Yeah, chill
I
out.
actually think one can meet the history on the grounds of history. So I wanted to say kind of two things, which I think were really interesting. So we're talking about obviously very ancient Greece, many, many, many centuries ago. I think probably around 1200 BC is roughly where I believe scholars have put it. So well over 3,000 years ago. And yet, in the formative period of Muslim history, and I'm sure it's the same case in the Gospels, right? So you've got Mecca and Medina as the context for the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. This is in the 600s, basically the early 600s by the Christian calendar. So a lot closer to now than it was to then, but not that much closer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even in that time, if you look at the close companions and family of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, you've got figures from other parts of the world. The first muezzin, the first person who does the call to prayer, is Abyssinian, as he's called, Habashi, Ethiopian, Bilal. You've got Suhaib al-Rumi, who's actually ethnically Arab, but was, I believe, kidnapped by Byzantine forces, raised in the Byzantine Empire, and therefore speaks Arabic with a profound, shall we say, Greek Hellenic accent, right? You've got Salman al-Farsi, who is descended from, his father was a Zoroastrian landowner, probably from Isfahan, maybe from somewhere else, but, finds his way into Medina. One of the Prophet Muhammad's wives is Egyptian. And so this is not a world where people were strangers to ethnic and ancestral diversity. So it's kind of hard to imagine that a seafaring civilization that cut across so many different parts of the world, they wouldn't have had encounters. We're not talking about someone who's staying home, but like kings and warriors would not have encounters with the wider world. But then the part to me that was the most depressing and amusing in equal measure was criticism of who is cast as Helen. And what is the standard of beauty? And that's an argument others have made far more eloquently and powerfully than I ever could. And I encourage people to read and listen to those arguments. But my take on it specifically was, here's actually a great instance in which folks don't understand what it is they claim to believe in. So we're saying Odysseus, Homer had a different conceptual moral universe. One of the functions of marriage in the pre-modern age was to create unity across kingdoms, but also to emphasize the distinction between the common and the elite.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at Muslim history, many historians understand this, but people watching or sort of observing Islam casually and Elon Musk style being unable to say why they're racist, but actually saying they're racist in the same breath, Like, if you can't answer if you're not racist, then you're probably racist. So, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll put it in the show notes. But what was interesting to me is that, and I'm sure this happened in the Roman case, that you married to build alliances between peoples, but also to show your power and your difference from the ordinary person. So having a wife who was not Greek was not a problem in the least, right? Like, it was actually a mark of you were building unity, you were building connections, and therefore you were a king, you were not a commoner, right? The logic of democratic majoritarian nationalism is the product of the 19th and 20th century. It did not exist in their conceptual universe. In their conceptual universe, to be a minority was a good thing because by definition, the elites are the minority, and the king is the ultimate minority, and the king is a register above. Hence, when Odysseus is kind of taking out all the suitors, right? Eventually, many of them fall to the ground and recognize him as the king, right? He's never going to bow to them. They're supposed to bow to him.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I found so interesting was that many of the people who claim to be making the argument on behalf of history and integrity and fidelity to tradition themselves don't even understand the things they're advancing.
Obviously. Yeah.
But then I guess my question here is actually, why can't we be more comfortable in claiming that text? And then I'm going to get to my question for you. In claiming that text, in this case, the Odyssey, right, as part of our story. And so my question to you is, and I'm asking this to you because you are the majority on this podcast, do you think, and I mean that seriously, I genuinely want to know how you think about this. I think that every American student should study the Odyssey and the so-called great books of what we call Western civilization, alongside other great books, right? Like, I teach Malcolm X to my students. I think all Americans should read the autobiography of Malcolm X. But I also think all Americans should read, if not necessarily the Odyssey, then works by Greek thinkers, Roman philosophers, text from the Bible. I think that's actually really important. I think we should have ownership of it, but I want to know what you think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wonder if even the more important thing is we need to teach people how to encounter text, and what is text and story and narrative doing? How does it function? And a lot of the assumptions of a modern reader is that everything is a historical or scientific textbook, and it must be completely faithful to the quote unquote facts of reality. And I don't think in the ancient world that's not how story or myth or narrative functioned. That's not what it was being asked to do for people. It was much more about identity construction and meaning construction than it was about trying to depict reality in kind of like a scientific process kind of way. It's not simple to figure out what a hermeneutical structure, an interpretive strategy is to encounter these kind of mythic texts. But I think it's really crucial because what it does is it helps us not just read those texts in a constructive and helpful way, in a meaning-making way, but it also helps us read our lives that way. And so, I think that for me is really what these stories do.
That's exactly why I went on that long rant, because you always this is why I love you. You always break it down.
Love you too, Haroon.
You break it. Let's go on a 10-year voyage that ends badly for both of us. But I think you have a way of turning questions around that I find deeply compelling and deeply illuminating. And that's exactly it. It's my instinct is to say, okay, you want to argue on the grounds of history. Let's talk about history and what you don't understand about history. And you're like, you're illiterate. Let me tell you how to read a text. I really appreciate that we come at this in a way that is mutually beneficial, unless you disagree with us. But I was going to say, this is a side note, but I keep making asides, but I guess it's like a text. It should have footnotes. It should have many, many footnotes. Footnotes make me very happy because I feel like you're going on the only adventure you can still go on as a human being in the world, right? Because who among us would not at some point just pull out Google Maps, right? Like, this is great. It's very interesting, but I even have a lightning round for you, but here's my first one. Did you like Tom Holland as Telemachus, the son of Odysseus and Penelope? Because I kept seeing Spider-Man and I was really struggling with that. I couldn't, and I think it's because he's so marked in my mind as Peter Parker that I wanted to be like Peter Parker, son of Penelope, and it just rolled off the tongue and then it worked for me. But then it didn't work in the concept of the universe because it's Spider-Man.
Yeah, I think he's relatable. He's likable. One of the challenges of introducing such famous people in all these roles is that you have these significant associations. Like I'm thinking like, man, it must be nice for Tom Holland and Zendaya to spend like 6 months together making this film. You know, like you want to be totally in the world, you know? And so like, there's just a lot of famous people in there. And we have a long history with all of them. And they all have their own particular associations and context. I don't know. I thought he was fine. I mean, we talked about the complexity of the character, and he for sure is a pretty complex. I mean, like, just do a little reading about who that guy ended up marrying in Homer's text, and it becomes very complicated very quickly. But
not Zendaya.
Not Zendaya, exactly. Yeah. But I don't know. He didn't like stand out for me, but I thought he was fine.
I saw what he was going for in that Telemachus is someone you're not going to think can be king.
Right. And he for sure didn't. He felt
because he's very young.
Right. Yeah.
He comes across as young. You want to give him a hug. Right. And you don't want to, like, probably Odysseus is not the person you want to hang out with, but in an emergency, Odysseus is the person you would call.
Right.
Like he's the guy who's going to literally carry us all on his back. But we're not going to invite him to the Super Bowl party. He's probably going to be a downer, right? So
you're like, you're going to be like, chill out, dude. We're trying to watch the Super Bowl.
It's the halftime show. It's like, none of this is real, right? And then stop telling us about Polyphemus and apophaticism. But, okay. And then second question is, the whole scene with Polyphemus, I kept thinking, like, a lot of these trials along the way, right, are almost unavoidable, right? Like, you have to pass the whirlpool. Those are the sun god's cattle. You are very hungry. And maybe in the case of Circe, if you see like a docile lion while you're walking up a hill, maybe you just go the other way. I think that's that is monoculture across the human species, right? Like we generally don't go in the direction of the lion. We generally walk away from the lion. But with Polyphemus / Cyclops, I kept thinking, why in the hell are you guys going into the cave? Like, what is this, Plato's cave? Are you trying to make a point? Why would you do that? What could possibly end well there? Like, you don't even have a torch.
Yeah, I mean, they were hungry, right? They're following that sheep in there or whatever.
I mean, maybe send one guy, right? Like, that's the whole point of hierarchy. This is not a democracy.
Yeah, you feel the whole entire theater like tense up because like, here it comes. This
is not going to be good. Yeah. No, it's a great movie. Can I give you my lightning round now?
Sure. I have one question for you.
Awesome.
Too.
Yeah. Shoot.
Okay.
Or don't shoot. Just
so
ask.
I was talking to my spiritual director yesterday about the film, and he went and saw it with his wife, and they left the theater together, and he loved it. He was like, I'm all about it. I'm very much into anything like it just like inspires awe and overwhelm. That's how I was feeling. And his wife did not like it at all because she said there was no relationship. It was all about an individual man's quest. And for her, it was a masculine film. She loves Lord of the Rings. She's like, where's Bilbo and his boys? You know? So how does that resonate with you? Do you think this is a primarily kind of masculine formation of meaning and story?
I remember reading once that Tolkien had introduced the hobbits, and whether this is him thinking about it after the fact or how intentional it was, I don't know, although obviously he was very intentional about a lot of things. So he's got the Silmarillion, which is the precursor to the whole Hobbit Lord of the Rings universe, which is very Odyssey style, elves and kings and wizards and dragons and all of that. And then you've got the Hobbit Lord of the Rings, and he says that, and maybe, I don't know if it's him actually, now that I think about it, I should be cautious, or it might be people who've analyzed the text, that the hobbits are relatable. Like, you see yourself in them. Like, I would also be hungry. Yeah, I would be hungry at this point, right? I would also think this is a bad idea, right? Like, no one's going to identify with Aragorn or Legolas. I mean, they might think they do, and then they end up, turning to Grok to create documentaries because they believe in humanity, but just not enough to cast actual humans.
Elon Musk thinks he's an elf. That makes so much sense. That, like, really, we should follow
I think
that
it's a
up
category
sometime.
of person who thinks they're the hero, but nobody would ever follow, other than other people who think they're their hero who nobody would ever follow. And I don't mean that in a dismissive, contemptuous way. I mean it I actually mean it by pointing to something very true. The reason that the hobbits work is because we see ourselves in them. Yes. And the reason that Aragorn works is because we see how the hobbits follow him, and that makes us want to follow him. right? There's a sense of a humanity there. So I agree with the point that you don't see the relationship, but I think what's interesting about it is you can see in Odysseus what makes people follow him, but you also see how that can be so dangerous, right? Because he followed Agamemnon, his men followed him, and then followed Agamemnon and his men, and then where did it lead? And so I think it's actually a very deep reflection on the power of charisma and authority, and how the same figure who can clean house, literally in the case of Ithaca, like he cleaned his own house out and eliminated the suitors and restored his family, however briefly, before getting on the Odyssey and sailing to, I don't know, Ukraine. I don't know where they were going, but somewhere in that general direction. I don't know if they were going west or east. I guess they can't really go east because they're on the east coast of Greece, right?
They're supposed to go west, aren't they?
No, they're on the west coast of Greece, right? So then they would have to go to Italy. Right?
Yeah, they're going somewhere to make sacrifices. So
next scene, he's in that cafe with Alfred and Bruce Wayne and Catwoman, and they're all sitting drinking espressos, but then they kind of recognize each other and move. But to that point, I actually think it's a very human story about what is, actually it's interesting. What is masculinity? Where is it strong and where is it dangerous? And it's almost like it's two sides of the same coin.
Maybe. As long as you can string a bow really well and shoot it through some axes, it's good.
Yeah. It would have been really awkward for everyone if he couldn't, He's like, no, I'm Odysseus. It's just been a long time since I've had a bow. I was being drugged on an island for many years.
Lotus flower, it really takes it out of you.
Yeah, I wasn't protein maxing. And I got a question for you. This is a good one. You're Christopher Nolan.
Okay.
You can now film a wall and get people to pay a lot of money to watch it.
Yeah. What
would you do next as a movie?
Like, what story would I tell?
Yeah, like you've got an unlimited. Okay, let's turn it around. Let's make it more direct. You can sit down next to Christopher Nolan and say, "I have an idea for a movie," and that this man, this man, like, there's no one else you could ask who would have an unlimited budget. Effectively, and could put any story on screen.
I have an answer. I have an obvious answer. So, after I read Dan Flores' Coyote America,
yes,
my wife started giving me all these like coyote myths because they're the oldest stories in our continent, Haroon. And I think it would be really cool to get somebody to try to resurrect some of those stories in like a Hollywood kind of blockbuster way. So I would give him some coyote myths. Yeah, I think that's what I would do personally.
Yes, that's what you would do. Yeah,
yeah. How about you? You have an answer? What story would you want him to tell?
I have a facetious answer and then a serious answer, and then you can guess which one is which. Okay. So the first is an adaptation of Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk, and I think that would be. I'm not going to tell you because I think it would be interesting that if someone said that his AI chatbot could make a better movie than you did. I think that would be an interesting challenge.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the second is I would ask him to do the Star Wars prequels.
Oh.
Because that story never received the justice it deserved. And now I've made an enemy of George Lucas. So maybe I'm sorry. I'll go repent.
Please do. We can only hope that you've been an enemy of George Lucas, that he's listening to this. That would be amazing.
I mean, would it?
Yes, it would. Absolutely.
That would be cool. Do you think he's the one in the Odyssey?
Yes, exactly. If George Lucas wanted to be on our podcast, would you say yes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. George, I'm sorry.
All right, man. Sounds good. Talk to you next week. All right, peace. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Zach Swellbar for recording our theme music. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know what questions we should be asking and who else we should be talking to.